Yes, Queens of the Stone Age's self-titled debut holds up, and it sounds great. Now, whether you're a longtime rocker trying to find out what Gen Z thinks about rock music, or you are a Gen Z rocker yourself trying to get an idea of the landscape, what kind of music's good to listen to, where should you start, you're in the right place. Anyways, today we're talking about Queens of the Stone Age's first album. Queens of the Stone Age is an incredible band, but they're not very accessible. As in, I don't think your friends who aren't musicians will get into them. So if you're a musician, this is your band. If you're a rock person, you're gonna love this band. If you're not a rock person, mileage may vary. So when you're looking at this first album, it's kind of interesting. I'm listening to it right down on my headphones. So if you want to, you can put your headphones in and listen along. Um, yeah, it's it's interesting because it has some incredible songs that to this day, when they play live, are just amazing, right? Regular John is not a song to listen to on an album, it's a song to see them play live, right? So the first song is Regular John, right? Go look up, like, I don't know, 1998, like Queens of the Stone Age live, right? Find something around that period when this came out, and you're just going to see them play Regular John, and you're like, oh, that is so much better than the record. Not, ooh, burp. Not because the record's bad, just because when you listen to the way it comes out when they're doing it live, when you've got an audience and they bring it down for the quiet parts and bring it back up and smash it, that's like the pinnacle. And likewise, a song like Mexicola is just beautiful, even on the record. But when you hear some of these songs live, they really click. The rest of the album, though, it's fun. It's good. It's the blueprint for Queens of the Stone Age, right? And I think that's something that I was reading some of these old reviews that you got here. There was one, was this Rolling Stones, or what was it? So after the next two albums, Rated R and Songs for the Deaf, came out, Thomas Erlewine of AllMusic gave the debut album 4 to 5 stars. And I think it's probably about accurate. This album's like, I would say honestly, an 8 out of 10. Like it's got a lot there, but it's not like undeniable in the sense that, like, you play this and everyone's gonna go, "Oh my god, this is one of the greatest rock bands of all time." They're gonna be like, "It's a good band," you know. That's kind of how I feel a little bit about some Smashing Pumpkins. I haven't heard all of their records yet, but I go, "This is really good," but I know I'm probably not always going to be in the mood for it, and I might just not get into the band at the level that I could if I was a slightly different listener. And so, yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, this album is fucking great. Now that we're past the 1 minute, I can swear. Yay! YouTube. Anyways, this is the Rock Show with Connor Farrell. Yeah, just going over. So, real quick, what do I think of this album? Like, when did I first hear it? I heard the song Avon probably when I was 15. I started taking guitar lessons at, or no, maybe I was 14, at the School of Rock in San Diego at Point Loma. Go to School of Rock if you'd like to teach your kids how to play an instrument. But basically, the way they have it at School of Rock is you can sign up to do these shows, right? Where your kid will take lessons, but then they'll be with a group of kids and they're going to get to like learn individual songs and play in a band together. And so that crucible of fire really gets you to be able to play an instrument pretty quick. It's very uncomfortable, a lot of discomfort at first, but then once you do get things that start to click, it's like, oh, so good. And so Avon, the second song on here, is like one of the first songs I had to play. Um, I think Queens of the Stone Age was, like, it was a Queens of the Stone Age show that we were doing together. And yeah, I think it was really, honestly, looking back at it now as a Queens of the Stone Age fan, I'm like, you gypped me. You didn't put my favorite songs or anything close to it on that lineup we were listening to. But Mexicola in like Avon were definitely there. And even then, just like, this is a great, just like all the little riffs, all the little things. It's so fun. It feels like if you're a guitarist it's kind of like listening to Rush or Primus, but you're listening to the parts of the song that aren't the hook or the main part. It's when the band goes on a tangent and just starts riffing off and just having a good time and just stays there. And so a lot of this album feels like the riff part of more of a, like rock song just going off its wheels. And so for that reason, it feels like it's a little unfocused, right? And I think when you get to Rated R, the next album, you really see it's this album, but like way more focused, and they're having like more fun. They're loose with it. They know what they're doing. They're kind of like, you know what? This really is the band that like we're in. It's really good. But yeah, I'd say the standouts are definitely Regular John, Mexicola. I think it's definitely like what's that called? You can't quit me, baby. Really good, kind of slow build type of song, a lot more intense. But then just stuff like How to Handle a Rope and just a lot of the other stuff, just lots of good riffs. So it's really fun to go into this album and go like, oh, I want to pick up. It makes you want to tune your guitar into C standard, which I've done. You have a guitar, you put it into C. So instead of E, what it normally is, you drop everything. E, E flat, D, you go D flat, C. You end up at a major third down from where guitar is normally tuned because all the songs are, in that tuning for, I think, the first like 4 or 5 Queen's albums pretty much. But you just hear a riff like Mexico, like doom 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 doom. That'll make you really like the idea of either having a 5-string bass, right, or dropping your bass down to C. It's just so good. Here's the way I think about it. They say in music, the money, on the guitar is all below the 5th fret. But if you want to get, have fun, you go up and solo in the higher register. But the money and the songwriting and everything is in the 5th fret. It's from 0 to 5, playing all the basic chords and yada, yada, yada. But I think it's really funny because I would say take that principle, put it on steroids. You just almost think about it like drawing the neck of the guitar back and chopping off the top. That's really what you're doing when you're like going down, right? So if you tune your guitar lower, really you're just moving up where that 5th fret would be. And so now it's at like the 9th fret if you're in C. And so I just think about it like we basically doubled, the space where you make the money. And because that's when you're really adding on like the ability to do good rock riffs. Like another band that has songs in C, Witchfinder General. Really good. I would say this album actually reminds me the most of like Witchfinder General, just because it's really good songs that the first time you hear it, you're probably not going to like immediately like it. It's an acquired taste. But after like the 5th listen through, you're going to be like, oh, nothing. I repeat, nothing else scratches the itch quite like this. There's a band, Witchfinder General. I believe Death Penalty is the first album, and then Friends of Hell is the second album. And that really reminds me of early Queens of the Stone Age, but it's it's in C, right? And it's a lot of these kind of like classic metal, or what they'd call heavy metal, kind of like guitar sounds, kind of around stoner rock and that kind of stuff. And a lot of the stoner rock stuff is quite unfortunate for me, but like most of it, I feel like it just either doesn't hit because either it's I feel like a lot of it doesn't have good singing. I feel like it's a big problem for rock bands is like they shoot themselves in the foot because they don't have a good singer, or they just like come up with something while they're playing instead of recording the riff with the drums or whatever, and then after the fact coming back and saying, okay, what can I sing over this? And let your brain just kind of like come up with ideas and like try different rhythms, like start tapping rhythms that are different from the riff while it's playing, and then you're going to try and sing with it, and then you're going to try and come up with something, right? I feel like a lot of bands don't do that, especially when it comes to bands that like, drop tune or in more the stoner genre. And especially when you get like, super doom metal-y, doom metal being basically, so stoner rock, the idea is that the band before this, that Josh Homme, so Josh Homme is the lead guy from Queens of the Stone Age. And so he had a band before this band called Caius that he played guitar in. And basically, Caius was in the desert, outside of LA in Palm Springs, kind of by where Coachella is, right? And Joshua Tree, that whole area. But it's very similar to kind of how it is here in Arizona, where it's just like desert and it's just boring and like kind of there's a malaise that comes over you that's a little bit not like depressing, but just like it's brutal. There's no grass. I think we evolved as humans to see grass as being like, a sign of like good, comfort, relax. I personally know anytime I go to like the Pacific Northwest, right? Go to like the Oregon coast, go to Scotland, right? Any place like that, the green, it just feels right. I feel good. I feel calm. That's why I made it. That's why it's my color, because it kind of relaxes me. But yeah, and I think when you're in a desert like Queens of the Stone Age was when they started out, or before that, Caius, Kyuss, you get this, there's this real like, how do you trudge along in that? And I know at some point Josh Homme, the lead singer and guitarist for Queens of the Stone Age, his prior band Caius, at some point, I think around the beginning of the first album and kind of beginning of their career with Queens, I think he started doing, I think it was meth, and instead of like smoking meth, I think he snorted it. And so, it's funny, you see those images where it's like, here's what happens to your face after you do drugs, right? And the people who do meth look like really messed up. And so you're like, okay, if Josh Homme was doing meth, like, why doesn't he look messed up? Why does he just look, like an older guy, with a salt and pepper? Why does he look, still George Clooney-ish rather than like a crackhead? And I just have a theory, and I think he might have said this in an interview recently, now that he's clean, and he kind of came out and announced this, and it was really shocking to me. But he kind of said that like when you're snorting it, it doesn't mess up your face. It's actually the process of smoking something that messes that up. And I think there's something to that. When people smoke weed, you know, I think it's generally seen as safer to eat cannabis and to ingest it in that way than it is to smoke it, right? Whether it's vaping and then you're getting particles in the plastics. Talk about plastics. So, like, you get plastic in your food, you get plastic in everything. If you use plastic Tupperware and then, you microwave it in the Tupperware to reheat leftovers, now you've got plastic in your food. Congrats. I'm drinking from a plastic bottle right now, and that's because it's convenient. And my metal one got really stinky, and I haven't been able to clean it thoroughly, and I've put off doing it. All this is to say, we all ingest a little bit of plastic every single day. But if you're vaping, right, and you've got a plastic device where you're heating stuff up, really plastic starts causing problems when you get it hot with food. And so when you heat up plastic with food, particles, parts of the plastic can seep in. And so when you're doing something like vaping or smoking weed, you can see how very quickly, and then that's another thing too. It's like people are big on nicotine and Zyn, right? Having Zyn. I have my Zyn. Do you have my Zyn? Dude, Tucker Carlson says you need to have Zyns. Dude, it's not just like a liberal thing. Dude, I'm so conservative. I'm so based in like traditional for having nicotine pouches. There's a lot of fallacies that come with like, conservative versus liberalism, right? This idea of like, okay, let's be, and not liberalism in the sense of, more definitional, like you'd say classical liberal, like kind of, Renaissance type of ideals and ideas like free trade and Adam Smith and limited government. I mean, in the sense that people use the word now, liberal, referring to just really basically the idea that like change is always good, and conservative in the idea that the literal meaning of the word, but typically gets extended to that whatever has existed is preferable to change. Basically, change is bad versus change is good. And clearly, it's sometimes change is bad and sometimes change is good. Clearly, that's the correct answer, right? Like, let's take an example. If you are starving and you get food, that was a good change, right? You changed from not having food and being starving to having food and not being starving. But if the change is from having all of your limbs functioning and having all of your senses to getting a car accident and now you have no limbs, you're quadriplegic entirely, and you have no senses, you can't see, what is it? You can't see, you can't feel, you can't smell, you can't lick. No, you, what is it? See, smell, touch, feel. That's the same. See, smell, hear, touch, taste. So let's say you could only, let's say you can't hear anything, so no more rock music, no more podcasting for you. You can read a transcript of this if you'd like. You can't see, so no more looking at art. And, man, I already forgot. Oh, you can't smell. So all you can do is touch things and hear them. Wait, I said you can't hear. You can touch them and taste them. Correct. So you can touch things, taste them. You cannot see, you cannot hear, and you cannot smell. Clearly, that's not good change. And so, yeah, so when you get to things like, oh, dude, I'm traditional because I'm having my nicotine and my zins, you know, the old people used to smoke tobacco, and vapes are like liberal and gay and stupid. And, you know, I would say, you know, the argument against vaping would be inhaling more plastics than you otherwise would, right? And going to an area like your lungs, which probably aren't exposed to as much microplastics, you know, as your gut's probably, you know, exposed to a little bit of it, but your gut's probably better equipped, in my opinion, because your gut is equipped with acid to, you know, kind of break apart things into more fundamental pieces. So when you're taking something, you know, like vaping, I got on this whole tangent about conservative and liberal, and oh, dude, I'm so cool and conservative for doing my zins. But really, the advantageous thing, similar to the way that, you know, smoking might, you know, vaping might give you microplastics in your lungs, which is probably not advantageous, not good, not a thing that you'd want, would not give you an advantage in, you know, any realm of human endeavor, to quote the top G. No, but if you're using kind of that analytical framework, that was the interesting thing with Top G, is you're just sitting there like, you know, this guy has something going on, but you know, he's playing this character, which you get, it's wrestling, right? All of this is wrestling, right? Why am I wearing this specific outfit? You're like, maybe because it's because of the internet, because I want to be marketable and remembered and recognized. People are going to call me Fred from Scooby-Doo, who benches 220 when I probably certainly bench greater than 220. Look at this. For the audio listeners, I am flexing, and I clearly can bench 220. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I benched 220 like a year and a half ago, but since then, I haven't really been trying to do 1 rep maxes on the bench press. I've just been doing like dumbbells. I've been doing, you know, free weights. I've been doing deficit push-ups to get to basically to, rather than have a number of how heavy I can do, what's like my strength, right? I'm going for muscle size, right? And so if you want to get, you know, more muscle size, hypertrophy, right? Hypertrophy is the word for muscle size, right? Or growth in the total size of muscle. If you want to grow more muscle, you want to have more hypertrophy, you want to emphasize the most stretched position you can on the target muscle. And you want to do it, you know, and potentially you might want to do repetitions exclusively in the stretched range of motion, right? So there's lots of debate about this. Technically, there's passive and I think active tension. Passive tension is when you're kind of at rest. You're where your body would be if you weren't doing anything, right? And that's where you have the most passive tension in your body. Active tension. So for me, like my chest, if I'm just standing up straight and my arms are normal, down by my side, that's the most amount of passive tension on my chest, right? But if I bring my arms back and I stretch my chest out, I bring my shoulder blades back, I bring my elbows down as far as I can along that kind of path of stretch that the chest fibers move in, that's where I'm going to have the highest amount of active resistance, especially, or active tension, when active resistance doesn't make sense. Active tension, when I have weights down here and I'm stretching out, basically that's where you're going to have most of the active tension. That's where you're going to feel stretched out. And that's what's going to potentiate muscle hypertrophy. That is what's going to lead or be the thing that happens before your muscles start to grow. And so if you want to break down, something like, can I do, in theory, I could take the bench press and I could go just here. I could just do reps at the top. That is going to put a lot of fatigue on my triceps, right, which is a secondary muscle in most pressing motions, right? Like if you're talking about a chest press, right? And the target is to grow your chest. But if you do things up in this range of motion, you're mostly, fatiguing your joints and tendons because you're probably using a really high weight to just half rep it up at the top, not even. And you're also not stretching to a significant degree your chest or your triceps. You're not stretching any of the involved muscles, and so it's technically, this is what you call your stimulus to fatigue ratio, right? So stimulus, muscle growth stimulus, that means how much stuff you're doing that actually causes growth, and fatigue is how much wear and tear and tiring out you're imposing on either your body, your nervous system, the actual muscle in question, the tendons and the joints and the ligaments around that muscle and connected to it, or that they connect to. All of that stuff gets fatigued. You impose fatigue. So every time you do work meaning you take a force or a weight, right, that's being pulled by gravity or by a cable or by, something. You take a force and you move it over a distance. Force times distance is work, right? So when you do work with your muscles, you want to do that work in the stretched position, right? And you want to do it preferably by controlling the way down, coming up quick, controlling the way down. If you do that, not only does it lead to more stimulus, it actually means you're able to use a lighter weight, which therefore has less force, right? If you're having something that's lighter, it's not putting as much force on your joints, right? And you're going with control, so you're not dropping things on your joints suddenly. You're not dropping things on your muscle. So really, you're also kind of, by doing things in stretched positions, you're increasing your flexibility to a certain extent, or at least not going to be losing flexibility to any meaningful capacity, though I'm not entirely sure about flexibility or quite researched on that. But I can't imagine it would hurt to be, emphasizing the fact that you get full ranges of motion or even stretched ranges of motion, because most people don't have a problem crossing their arms in front of their body like this, right? Now, if you're an audio listener, I'm swinging my arms in front of me, kind of like I'm doing the Macarena, right? I'm swinging my arms in front of me. Now, most people don't have trouble doing that. What they really do have trouble is like pull your hands all the way back and connect them behind you, and then turn your hands, so that, like let's say you put your hands behind your back and you make this shape. If you kind of like hold your hands behind your back, the easiest way possible, and then you say, okay, now turn the thumbs of your hands outward, but keep your hands, connected. And you try and do that, it's going to get really difficult. And really, you're opening up kind of like your chest and your front thing. It's much more of a stretched kind of thing. And so for most people, that's, more of a challenge than non-stretched ranges of motion. So all this is to say, I do not know, since I tend to, do things that are more hypertrophic, as in lead to more hypertrophy, as in cause more muscle growth per unit of energy, per, amount of work done, things that have a good stimulus to fatigue ratio, because I am biased towards those things and I have been using those in my training rather than things that train for strength, right? So when you want to get strong with a muscle, right, it's different training than if you want to get big. If you want your muscles to be big, you train them typically anywhere when you're doing sets, right? You take a weight and you're doing an exercise and you're doing it for a certain amount of time. How many repetitions are you doing per, set? So let's say I do the bench press and I'm going to do 5 repetitions in a row before I rack the weight and take a rest. And I'm going to call those 5 repetitions all in a sequence. I'm going to call that one set. And I'm going to do, let's say, just 2 sets. So I'm going to do 5 reps back to back to back to back to back, keeping the weight and the tension on my target muscle, let's say, in this case, the chest. And then I'm going to rack the weight back on whatever, the rack is. It's going to support the weight and hold it. And now I'm going to get up, drink some water, walk around for maybe, 60 seconds all the way up to 5 minutes if I really, was important. But if you got stuff going on, maybe, you only do a, 90-second rest. But then I get back down, I do my next set. And so when you're training for muscle size, you want to train in the repetition ranges where you're doing 18 to, or sorry, not 18. You're trying to train from 8 reps to 20 reps per set, right? So when I go on the bench press, instead of doing, anywhere from 1 to 5 repetitions, which means inherently I'm having to use a way heavier weight. And so I'm training my body to do one time at the heaviest it can, or, weights that I can only barely do 1 or 2 times in a row because it's so heavy without needing to take a total recharge, rest, and reload kind of break in between the sets. Instead, you're training in the 8 to 12 rep range, which means you're doing 8 to 12 or 8 to 20, 8 to 20 repetitions per set. So I know this is kind of a little bit of a big ramble, but since I'm doing things where I'm in the stretch position, which means I'm using lighter weights, right? And I'm controlling the stretch, and the easy part of pushing up, I'm doing very fast, and then I'm slowly coming down and then holding. That's going to be really brutal, and you're barely going to have to use any weight. So because of those reasons, the only numbers I know is how many reps in the deeply stretched position doing this exact specific wonky form can I do with extremely light weights. That's the only number I have. I do not have the number of what is my 1 repetition max, right? What is the heaviest I could do for 1 repetition? And the last time I found that out, it was 225, which is the same and or greater than Fred from Scooby-Doo. So we got back to the color green. We talked about smoking and doing zins, and the fact that Josh Homme's face does not look messed up from doing drugs. Now, here's the thing. My cousin and I, about 4, maybe 3 years ago, a couple years into the band, we came out here, and we came out to Arizona, and we interviewed a band, and their manager I think, has a flip phone. They don't have social media. And we went to go interview them, and we ended up in in a neighborhood that we'd never been to before, in a slightly more suspect part of town, lower income. And and basically my cousin, he knew that Korn also in their early career was doing meth. I believe it was meth. And he decided it'd be really funny to just joke about meth. And we're joking about it, and similar to how Josh Homme and a lot of people in the desert apparently do meth, because one of the guys in the band, it was a 3-piece band, and the one guy was like, yeah, I actually was addicted to meth for like 10 years. He's like, I just got off like a couple months ago, and that's why I moved out of Yuma, Arizona. Yuma, Arizona is right at the border of California and Arizona, right? And it's almost like right by the Mexican border too. So it's right there at the bottom of, the country of the United States. And it's technically, I think, the lettuce capital of the world. It might be the lettuce capital of the United States. It's where, oddly, they produce a bunch of lettuce. But this man was like, yeah, I do meth and I'm in a band. And so we're like, okay, Josh Homme, living in the desert in a very similar climate, also did meth and was in a band. So you're kind of like, is there a pattern here? Anyways, that was a very awkward conversation with my cousin and band interviewing this band. All this is to say, this first album is good. It's sweet. I would listen to this if I'm a rock fan. I would try and learn some of the riffs, even if you don't change the tuning on your guitar. It's just really fun, and you get to see kind of like the blueprint for Queens of the Stone Age. But definitely watch this live. Go look at the B-sides from this time. But really, it's the next album, Rated R, where like, oh, this is a good band. You can play some of these songs for people who aren't that big of a rock fan, and they're going to be like, holy shit, this might convert me into rock. This is for people who've already drank the Kool-Aid, but this album's an 8 out of 10. Like I said, it's really good. What are boomers going to think? Boomers are going to be like, yeah, this is real rock and roll, man. This is rock, because they're playing riffs with distortion, which is true. But the songwriting isn't as tight and isn't as focused as it is on the next record. It's very kind of like wandering around and having fun. It feels like, the whole album is a part B to a song that has like a bunch of like crazy stuff going on that's really catchy and popular. And then there's just them jamming like in the middle or going on a tangent before they come back, right? It feels like a jam band. Anyways, but I think this is some of, the best blueprints. And this is really where, Josh Homme showed that, like, hey, Caius is actually, you thought that was the biggest thing I'm ever going to do. That's actually, like, the smallest thing I'm ever going to do and the least impactful thing when it comes to music. And yeah, I think Josh Homme's a huge inspiration. Um, and I get really excited because the next album is really where the band starts to hit their stride. So that's where it is. Join me now in the next video. Okay? You Gen Z. Oh, if you're Gen Z, don't listen to this album. Listen to Rated R, which is the next album. Listen to Rated R first. And then once you like the band and listen to like their, actually, let's do right here. So if you want to get into this band, how would I recommend it from this record? I would say don't listen to this record. I also wouldn't say listen to the new record. You might like the new record. The new record's like, it's actually really fun. It's heavier and poppier, and extremely like focused, but also still kind of like doesn't lose its sense of like kind of like having fun, exploring things, and going on little tangents here and there, and then coming back in even harder than it left. Um, Yep, you could look at the Spotify like the This Is playlist, but I honestly I would go to Rated R. I would just go to the next album and just listen through that, and that's a lot more kind of diverse. Kind of like it's kind of like they took this album. They're like, but what if we like really like juiced up some of the stuff? We got it on steroids. I would say like this is like Avengers: Age of Ultron, and the next one is like Captain America: Civil War. It's still not the best because the best is going to be Infinity War and Endgame, but it's like, oh, this is the one where you're like, oh, this is an incredible record. This one's like good if you're a fan already. You probably overlooked it the first time you heard it, the first time you watched Age of Ultron. You're like, it's fine if you like the Marvel stuff. But once you go back, you're like, you know what? This is actually they were cooking. This is some good stuff. I forgot how good this was. Um, but you're still going to be like, well, I'm still always going to listen to, I'm still always going to listen to Rated R over this record. Like if I had to get rid of one, it's definitely Age of Ultron. I'm definitely going to watch Civil War, over Age of Ultron. But likewise, yeah, you're like Rated R is definitely like, this is the first album where you go, okay, this band is incredible. Um, but dude, I'll tell you, just the way we look at album covers and stuff like that totally influences how you listen to a record. And they just finally, released the original album cover on Spotify. They censored the nipples in there, but dude, that art makes it so epic. Like this is just a perfect album to get into a vibe. It's a vibe record. It's not a hits record, right? It's just like the aesthetic. That's how I feel about like Zack Snyder movies. Like you're just there to just look at them. You're not really there to like follow the plot as much. Some of them you are, but there's lots of movies like that where people are like, it's just the vibe, it's just the album, like My Bloody Valentine, or like Shoegaze, or even Deftones. Like a lot of stuff you're just like, I just like the energy of it. And just that energy is good. I think the energy is impeccable here. And then the next record, they channel that and they use it like a fucking ray gun. It's like incredible. So yeah, definitely go check out the Rated R review, the next episode of the podcast, Rated R by Queens of the Stone Age. How do I think this compares to other debut albums? It's a solid debut, but this is the first time, there's kind of a saying when it comes to like classic rock records and stuff before the 2000s that usually a band finds their legs, they find their sound, they hit their stride on the second record, and that's usually their first iconic album. I would say Queens of the Stone Age is one of the rare examples where that's true. Blur is another band where the first record, though Blur is a different sound from Queens of the Stone Age, I think it's actually a very similar comparison because it's another band where it's like extremely creative and a little all over the place. And it's a musician's band more than I think it's like a band that's like everyone's going to love it the first time they hear it. Like, I don't think Queens of the Stone Age has like a ton of hits that are just like super commercial. Like Emotion Sickness is good. And like some of the stuff off the new album and like Clockwork, and like the way you used to do off Villains is really catchy, gets people in. Lost Art of Keeping a Secret, which is off Rated R. Little Sister, Threes and Sevens. Like you can probably have like 10 or 12 songs you can pick from Queens that are like solid, like pretty like tight commercial. Like these are like would get someone into rock if they'd never heard rock before. But I think a lot of it really where the money is if you're a rock fan and you're like, I play an instrument, I like writing music, you just listen to this and you're like instant inspiration. You can feel the fact that they're inspired here and you can get inspired by proxy. It's just so great. It makes you just want to like be in a band. It's a really good kind of entrance. But once again, don't underestimate the importance of album art. This record, it really does remind me. I wonder if he was listening to Witchfinder General, just because this album art is a very similar kind of style and aesthetic. to Witchfinder General. The guitar's in the same tuning. But I would recommend, honestly, I would recommend you listen to this record and Witchfinder General and like some of that stuff after you start to overdose on the other records. Like after you start to like listen, like I've listened to Songs for the Deaf so many times that I don't like it anymore. I still love it, but like I can't listen to it like all the way through. It doesn't, it like, I'm still like, I've stunted the receptors in my brain that respond to it. And so I just need to give it some time before I come back to the record. But once you do something like that and you're like so stunted on some of these other records because you've just heard them so much because they're that good, go to the first record, go to Witchfinder General, find the idiosyncratic things, and really fall in love with it. And yeah, I'll see you guys. Click on the Rated R review. Go right now. Go click on the next podcast. Okay? You've got 5 seconds to do that. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Did you do it? You're there? You're there? Okay, rock on.